tear, it falls and hits the ground. A tree, it falls without a sound. A bird, it calls and sends you home. A man, he sits in the cold all alone.
Hey, Sharna, thank you so much for joining me on The Joy of Sunflowers and being here today and speaking with me and everyone. It's really great to have you. We've spoken before, which was awesome. So it's really nice to see you again. Yeah, I want to get into your story and everything and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for thank you for creating this too, like creating a space for everyone to come together, because there's so much missing from like the pregnancy loss space in terms of support and information and what's available and what's accessible. So, I really acknowledge you for putting this all together and creating it first and foremost.
I find it really hard to take all these like compliments. It's coming a lot, and I'm just like, oh, thank you. I said to my husband, "What do I say?" And he said, "Thank you." And I'm like, okay, thank you. Silly.
Yeah. And it is. It's an amazing thing. Like it's not easy either to line everyone up and get everyone to come on and do it and just make it happen. So, you had this vision, like when, like you said, we spoke before, like from however long ago it was, like last year sometime.
Months and
You had
months.
this vision. Yeah. And it's finally come to life, like, and you've done, and it looks amazing. Like everything that you've been creating, it's amazing. So thank you.
It's been an emotional roller coaster.
I could imagine. Yeah. So my name is Sharna Southan. I am a pregnancy loss practitioner or pregnancy loss coach. I am also a lost mom, and I am a mom to a rainbow baby. I am also a business owner with my husband, and very much keep everything like that keeps me busy, my personal business and my business with him. So that's kind of me. But then essentially so I experienced a miscarriage. So out of that, I realized there wasn't enough support in the pregnancy loss space. And through my healing and recovery, I realized that I had something more to give. There was something inside of me that was bigger than me. It was, that I was struggling through my pain and my grief, but knowing that 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss, there's more women out there that are experiencing the pain and the grief and the lack of certainty and direction and everything that I was experiencing. And there was nowhere to turn for that. No one to turn to help you through that. So that's where I knew my inner desire to do something bigger was, I guess my miscarriage was the catalyst for my, the change in my life, complete change in my life. There's never anything that was on the agenda, but then neither is loss. Like it's never anything that you would ever anticipate experiencing. So
Yeah, it's like life happened.
yeah.
And then you're like, wow, okay, great. And you learn all these things and this whole world gets opened up to you. And then before you know it, you're like starting a big event, or you're like starting an institution where you teach people, and it's like crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, your whole, like you said, life happens. So at any point, our life is always happening. Like it can either happen to us or it can happen for us. And essentially what I chose was, okay, like I've gone through this experience. At the beginning, I felt like I was being punished for it. But then I realized, no, this is an opportunity for me to grow and to create something, like create something that's going to transform other people's lives and empower other women through loss and educate them. And so that they know then that that's not the end of their story. So, because it can feel so consuming at the time. But, life does open up these opportunities. It's like a plot twist. Like you just got to, in the moment, go, okay, what am I going to do? Do I adapt and do I grow, or do I stay where I am?
Yeah, I think a lot of people get faced with that kind of decision making time, like where you go through something and then it's up to you what you're going to sort of do from there. And none of our lives look the way we thought they would. Like when you're a kid, you're like, I'm going to do this. And I mean, you dream of like princesses sometimes as well. I'm going to be a princess. Obviously, that's not going to happen for most of us. It can happen for some people. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't have princesses. But most
exactly.
No. So yeah, life doesn't turn out how we think it will, and we can plan and yeah.
Yeah, my life is definitely not the way that I ever thought that it was going to look. It all started essentially when I was 19. Like my dad died when I was 19. Like that was never part of me growing up. Like I assumed that my parents were going to be old and grey and live a full life. But he was 40, 48. So I was like, how is that a full life? But in those moments, you're like, well, he packed so much into that. He chose, like he knew he was unwell, but so he chose at any point he was going to, value his life and pack more into it, more experiences, more love, more fun, whatever. So he would have lived a full life just in a shorter period of time. And, that was my first thing of like, just, you have to cherish every single day that you've got here on earth. Like shit happens, unfortunately, to us, but we can choose. We can choose at any given moment what that can mean to us. Like I said, that was my first sort of pivotal moment in my life where I was like, okay, I'm going to embrace what's happening. I'm going to embrace my life, the good and the bad. And then obviously we had our miscarriage. And then that was like another kick in the guts. Like I felt like, what have I done wrong? I've already experienced like heavy stuff in my life at a young age. Like, why did I go through this again? Why was I experiencing this grief and literally heartache and heartbreak? Like I honestly felt like my heart was broken. And it's a word that I feel like is just thrown around, but until you go through stuff like that, you're just like, no, like it's a thing. Like I actually felt like it was the first time my heart was literally broken. And I'm like, why am I going through this again? Like, what have I done wrong? I'm a good person. Why am I being punished? Am I being punished because I didn't want to have kids earlier on in life? Am I being punished because, I made comments or whatever, like through my growing up, through my teenage years, like of just random stuff? Like, am I being punished for what I said or did? I guess that's the way that we can get caught in our own head about kind of what happens to us in our life. And I think that's human. I feel like it's a human response to want to find that reason and have that answer to go, oh, that's why it happened. And with my loss, I never got an answer. I never got a reason. It was just, it happened. And I had to process it from that point. I had to come to that sort of place of acceptance of not having an answer, not having a reason, and then wanting to try again, not ever knowing why it went wrong the first time. But I think that's one of the hardest places to come from.
So with your loss, how did the process go? How early and sort of how did you end up passing or going through the end of that process?
Yeah, so it wasn't anything like the doctor had tried to prepare me for. We had been trying to conceive and saw like a fertility specialist, and he gave me some medication to take to obviously increase my chances, which, you know, I did, because I was like, I want to fall pregnant. I want this to happen. I want this to be my reality. I'll do anything to get to have that in my life. So that in itself didn't look like anything that I had anticipated from a young age, because in school you're kind of taught how to, well, if you have sex, you'll fall pregnant. And, you know, it didn't happen like that for me. So, you know, for 5 years I was questioning, you know, is there something wrong with my body? I think about a month after I started the medication, I fell pregnant. And seeing that positive pregnancy test, like in my mind, I was like, oh, yes, I can finally, you know, be a mom, and I can leave my job, and I can be at home and watch them grow and do all of the things, like in my mind, like do all of the things that I've wanted to do for that, like forever, like however long I'd been planning it in my head from such a young age. All of that was then flooding to me and going, yes, this is now my opportunity. I can do this. I can be this mom. I can be a mom, and I can do all the things that I want to do. And then seemingly everything was fine on the outside. Like there was no pain, no nothing. I was tired, but, you know, I thought that was just all sort of part and parcel of being pregnant. But we went to our ultrasound appointment, and they said, you know, they were scanning for a while, and then they said those soul-shattering words of, you know, I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat. And in my mind, I was like, no, you've got to try again. Keep trying. It has to be, like, do something else. So they did an internal ultrasound, and came back with the same. He said it again, and I was like, no, this is not happening. Like, I never knew about miscarriage before experiencing it, but it was my worst nightmare. In that moment, I was like, no, like, we've been trying for so long. Why is this happening? And I thought I was about 10 weeks along. The baby had stopped growing at 7. So they shuffled us off to the doctors, where the doctor confirmed what had happened. The doctor said to me, it'll be like a heavy period. It should be fine. Just go home, and like, your body will do what it needs to do. So she said also that it takes about 3 weeks for your body to realize that the pregnancy is non-viable. And I was at that 3-week mark. So when I came home, I was just then anticipating, like, every day, waiting for it to happen, and not knowing what I was waiting for. Like, I didn't even know what to expect. Like, it was, what they tell you is so vague. And ended up, I think it was like the next day after we got home, I ended up spotting, and I was like, so is this it? Like, what do I do? And then I felt guilty for flushing the toilet, because then I was like, did I flush something? I don't even know, like, what I'm meant to do. Do I flush the toilet? Do I not? Like, and then I felt guilty for flushing the toilet. But then progressively it got worse. The bleeding got heavier. I started to experience pain, which then when I ended up in hospital, and they told me I was experiencing contractions. So for 2 days, I was at home experiencing contractions and taking Panadol, which was doing absolutely nothing for the pain. I was awake. I think I was awake the final night, through the whole entire night, just crying and contracting and crying and contracting. Like, I was I didn't sleep. And then I was bleeding to the point where I couldn't stand up. I was passing out. So, because that happened like from a Friday to a Sunday, like over the weekend, there was no doctors, and I thought it was normal. We were Googling it. So my husband's like, oh, this could last, up to 10 days. And I was like, 10 days, I'll be dead. Like, if I keep bleeding this way, I'll be dead.
Yeah.
Like, this cannot keep going. So we didn't go to hospital because I didn't know that it was out of the ordinary, because I didn't know what to experience. And Google was telling me all these different things. So I was like, well, maybe it is the heavy bleeding, but this is like excessive. Then the Monday I went to the doctors and they called the ambulance straight away. And the hospital here is like 45 minutes away. So the ambulance took me up to the hospital. They gave me like morphine in the ambulance, like for the whole way up. And one of the ambulance officers said, why didn't you call sooner? And I was like, because I didn't know. I didn't know that this wasn't normal. I've never gone through this before. Where's my, gauge? Like, I don't know. So when I got to the hospital, they obviously had a look inside and said, you're contracting, you're actually, so they hooked me up to a morphine drip, I think, when I was there. I can't remember. We had a really beautiful nurse that was with us in the emergency department. She was kind of making not light of my experience, but making it a bit more like sort of fun, so that I wasn't so like attention on what was happening. Because my husband was with me. So my husband was like kind of joking with her, like just totally irrelevant, random jokes. Like, so I'd be like laughing and then I'd be in pain and then I'd be laughing and in pain. So it was kind of like, she was a really good energy to have there, because she held space for me and understood what I was going through, but then also was trying to bring a bit of lightness to it as well. But then they said that I had to have a D&C because my body wasn't going to stop contracting. Like, it was still trying to get rid of, I don't want to say rid of, but get out whatever was left. I don't even know what was there. I don't know. That's the thing. Like, there's still so much that I don't know about even what they found when I went in for the D&C. But when I was going into the D&C, the nurse, just before I went into theatre, she said to me, a different nurse, and I'm like, I'm glad I didn't have her at all in the emergency department, because she said to me, she's like, oh, after tonight, after the D&C, you'll be fertile, so you can try again, like straight away. And I was like, are you serious? Like, I'm like drugged out on morphine anyway. So like, it kind of just was just like, I don't even know, like, what? And I just went, like, I don't even know what I said. But now I'm like, I'm like literally dumbfounded with how she, like, what had even possessed her to say what she did. Because then I was like, you do realize what I'm going in for. Just because they're going in and I'm going for this procedure doesn't mean that I'm recovered to try again. Like, I might be fertile, but there's no way that I'm actually going to be mentally prepared to go through that again. And I was just like, I'm so glad you weren't with me at all, like through any other part of me being here in the hospital. So she said her piece. I don't even know. In my mind, like looking back, it felt like 1 second that I was with her and she said that and then I was gone. But then I remember waking up in the recovery and I was by myself, like in a chair. I'm like, my husband wasn't there. I'm like, still sort of so numb from everything that I'd been through. And then they sent me home. I was like, all right, nothing. I was sent home with nothing. So yeah, it was a very, very traumatic experience. Like I remember ringing my mum saying I was going to die. Like I legitimately thought through that entire process that I was going to die. I was laying on the floor with my legs up in the air, trying to get, you know, blood back to my head because I was just passing out all of the time. And I called mum and I said, I don't know how I can get through this. And I remember writing all of this down. It was pages and pages and pages of just stuff because I have always written like what's in my head out so that it's out on paper and it's out of my head and it's something that's tangible. Whether I want to read it or not, again, I don't have to. But what I did was I wrote it all out. I never read it again, but I took it to my therapist and I gave it to her to read. And I'm like, this is what's happened. This is why I'm here. And she read it. She took, I don't know how, I think it was like 10 or 15 pages of just my thoughts and what was going on and what I'd been through. And she just looked up at me and she goes, this is so traumatic. And I was just like, thank you, because I legitimately feared for my life, like through that. And it's not anything that I was prepared for at all at any point, even the contractions. I didn't know what it was. I've never been pregnant before. I didn't know that I was experiencing contractions. And I wasn't told that that could happen. So, like, we were Googling everything. My husband was Googling everything. And then, you know, and it hurts me to think that he was witness that whole time as well. And he had to
It's okay. It's hard to speak about. It's amazing how it comes up on you, isn't it?
Yep.
It hits you at a time where you're just like, what? I thought I was okay. I'm just talking.
It hurts me to know that it's what he experienced, like it was what he saw and how he had to be there. And then he felt he had to be the person that had to be the strong one.
Yeah, but you know what? That's part of being a partner, you know? If he was going through something terrible, you'd be there for him and you'd have to be the strong one. Even if we went in the bathroom
Yeah.
or something, we would be the strong one in front of them, and then we'd go and boohoo somewhere because we're women and we cry.
It's just the fact that they feel like they have to hold it all together. And it wasn't until I was pregnant, 6 months pregnant with my rainbow, that he opened up and told me how it had affected him. And I was like, he held on to that for a year.
Yeah. And I mean, it would have been really traumatic for him, more so than some of the other experiences I've heard. Like I went through a miscarriage, but it wasn't like I didn't bleed out. I didn't need to go to hospital. Like it was natural and it was okay. It was horrible. Like I went through contractions and everything. But I think because I'd already had kids and I'd had them naturally, I think my body was better able to give birth to the sac that I gave birth to. you know, and if it had been my first one, maybe the story would have been different. Maybe I would have bled more, but I didn't. So I didn't have that trauma of going to the hospital and having that experience. And I think that would have been very traumatic for him, because obviously for my husband, he didn't have that. He didn't have to worry about me dying or anything like that. But for yours, he would have been terrified of that possible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I think, I mean, that happens in any scenario where there's an accident or there's, you know, life on the balance, you know. So, you know, don't feel guilty. You both had to go through something. It was traumatic for both of you, you know. And I think this is what you teach. This is what you do. This is what you teach. But you need someone else to say it to you, you know.
Yeah.
Like, because you teach it, and you're amazing, you know. You teach it, and I've heard so many great things about your course. And this is the thing, like, looking at someone who's teaching and all that, you still have to tell them these things. You still have to validate these things, because even though you're the spokesperson and the person that goes, yeah, you know, don't feel guilty, don't feel these things, you feel them, and someone needs to tell you. So don't feel guilty. You know, if the roles were reversed, you would have been just as traumatized and gone through just the same things in terms of like his life and how important he is to you and all that. So, you know, we can't feel guilty. We didn't choose it. Like, it happened to us.
Yeah. And I think it's the fact that, you know, they feel like as well, like I was going through all of what I had to go through and processing what I had to process. And it's very hard for them to open up. So I think that was like, and he obviously, you know, I was living that, but he was witnessing all of that as well. But then he held on to that. And I was like, and that's what makes me sad, because, you know, I wish, you know, that he was able to tell me a bit sooner than, you know, a year later, that how he had held on to all of what we were going through. Yeah, I think it wasn't until probably a bit further into my recovery that I was out of myself and being able to go, oh, actually, you know, how are you? Like, and that doesn't sort of happen because you're going through so much internally, emotionally, mentally, that we do kind of realize, well, I did anyway, that he witnessed, you know, so much of that. And to have that validation also from the therapist to say this was trauma. And then I'm like, he's witnessed that trauma. So it's essentially trauma to him as well, that he wasn't able to process. He wasn't able to move through that. But yeah, absolutely. Like, we're always there for each other. Like when we're going through the difficult times, but you kind of do forget that the other person has gone through that too sometimes, like to the extent that they have.
Yeah, and even if they haven't gone through the same emotional things, like, you know, attachment to whatever scenario, they have had to go through your emotional turmoil. So they've gone through your changes and your your growth. And in that, you know, that's kind of scary sometimes. You know, if your wife is changing, or if your husband's changing on you, you know, you have to go through that time and experience that. And then, you know, is my husband gonna go back to normal, be himself again? Like, and I'm sure they probably feel that way about us when we go through loss, and when they're like, am I gonna get my wife back? Is she gonna be normal? You know? And then, you know, we're changed. And they have to then accept that new us. And sometimes they love that, and sometimes, you know, it pulls people apart. But I think that's just that's all, like you said, it's part of it, and it can be ugly and it can be beautiful. We have different changes. And how have you taken that? Like, obviously your husband went through the trauma, you went through the trauma. Like, have you guys found that it's brought you closer, and what changes have you found within yourselves and your relationship through the process?
Yeah, so I feel like it definitely brought us closer. And it sort of allowed us to possibly open the communication more, because what I realized through that was we both were assuming what each other was feeling or thinking. And, through the actual sort of initial, stages of grief and stuff, like I was falling apart, and then he was like, he wanted to go back to work, and he's like, so why are you still so upset? And there was that real, like, we're not on the same page at all. Like, and that communication broke down. And then we just fought. So I feel like, after that, when he was able to open up to me, that's when I was like, okay, so this is now, like, moving forward. That was something then we sort of were able to, he still harbors a lot of things, but he's a lot better at being open to communicate or open to receive the questions, or if I want to sort of check in on him, like he's more open to receiving that, whereas before he had, like, his walls were up and he's like, fine, don't ask me about how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So the communication has definitely become a lot easier to talk about, especially with his emotions, because he's one of those men that just don't, it's like, no, emotions are bad.
Yeah, my husband's the same.
I'm
He
like, no,
doesn't cry. He just never cries at all.
yeah. Yeah. No, I think I've seen my husband cry once, and it was actually with the miscarriage.
See, my husband cried once, but it was for something really random. And like, you cried for that, but you won't cry for the baby. And it's just like,
Like, what is wrong with you?
yeah.
But yeah, no, he cried when I think he cried when we were in the doctors, and then he was okay for a bit, and then when we went and told my mum, like, he lost it. So I think that was, and he hadn't cried at any other point. Like, his, family members had passed away and he didn't cry. And, I'm like, do you cry? Like, is this an ability? Like, can this happen?
Do you
And
have tear
then,
ducts?
yeah. Do you have tear ducts? Let me check your eyes. And then, and then he cried, like, when we had the miscarriage, but since then, like, there's been no tears. So it was like a one-time thing.
Stoic
I'm
man.
good.
Stoic.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say though, have you talked to him about what it was like for him when you were in the hospital and you know, he wasn't sure if you were going to come out again? Like, because I mean, did he cry during that time? Do you know, or have you guys not really spoken about it?
Not specifically the hospital. Like, I don't remember talking about that specifically. We talked about the experience as a whole.
Yeah.
But not specifically the hospital. I think his mum was with him.
Oh, good.
I think my mother-in-law came up to the hospital as well. So I think she was with him when I was in surgery. But I haven't spoken to him specifically about the hospital, and I haven't spoken to her either. Like,
Yeah.
in terms of what she saw and how he was. But I don't know. It's funny. Like, every time I do try and bring it up with him, it kind of just, it's surface layer, like, information. It's not like deep sort of stuff. But yeah, I don't think we talked about the hospital specifically. It was more so just about the experience as a whole and how afraid he was, even when we found out the gender of our rainbow, like how afraid he was. And reserved in being happy. Like, and we were both the same. We were so reserved. Like, we wanted to be happy, but we also were very, very aware of obviously what could go wrong. And that was when he was really afraid of obviously being pregnant again, because then his heart is opened up again to something that could potentially hurt him and hurt us. But yeah, then he sort of opened up in just how scared he was and how he didn't know how to be there for me. The only thing he knew how to do was Google, because he's like, neither of us knew what to expect. So I didn't even know how to be there for me. And so he was like, how do I be there for you? And how do I support you? And then this was probably it was the biggest thing that we've been through as a couple in terms of grief and healing together, because he met me a year after my dad had died. So I had already been able to process, part of that. But obviously I was still very emotional, and, he's seen me cry like so many times. But together as a couple, that was our biggest, most heaviest thing that we had been through together. So neither of us knew how to navigate that. We're like, just like the blind leading the blind. We're just like, we'll figure out something that works. We weren't going to leave each other. We knew that part, but the rest was just like, well, what do we do? And that's where he was like really, really scared. He told me he was really scared. And especially then to go through all of that again.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about pregnancy after loss, because you don't know. You're reliving that period of time where, it didn't have a good outcome. So then you've got to deal with that.
And then it just changed. Like, I thought I'd get past the 7 weeks, and I was like, nope, still afraid. So then you get to the first trimester and you're like, nope, I'm still afraid. And then I got to the third trimester and to the week leading up to giving birth, and I was in tears, like the whole week, because it just changes. Like, the fear just changes. It's just what we can do with that. Like, we've got to just acknowledge that what it is, which is we have gone through something that's huge and traumatic and life-changing. And the fear is the past being projected into the present. So essentially what we've got to understand is where that fear is coming from. It's always going to be there. It's just how we process it, because otherwise it will consume you. Like, the fear can cripple you, unless you're in that right mindset to be able to go, okay, now what's happening? Where is this coming from? And know and shine the light on it. It's like that, the monster under the bed. Like, it's terrifying when you think there's a monster under the bed, but when you get the torch and have a look and there's nothing there, it's gone. My fear's gone. So it's like that. Like, we can shine the light on the fear, and that fear goes. It diminishes, and it doesn't have its power over you. But it has to be that we acknowledge it, because that fear, regardless of where you are in your journey, it can cripple you.
I think you have to surrender as well to the things that aren't in your control, and surrender to hope, like being hopeful, and surrender to having joy and being joyful in those moments that you can cling on to. Like, the baby is alive right now. I just saw the baby. You can cling on to those moments, even if, it might not pan out the way you want it to and the way we would expect.
Yeah, absolutely. Surrendering it's exactly what I teach too, like surrendering what you can't control, because so much in our so much of our journey you can't control. The only moment you can control is the moment that you have in, like, right now, the moment you have in front of you. And what can you do in that moment to bring yourself that calm, that peace, that joy, that whatever it is, even if it's just a cry, like, to give yourself that release. Like, how can you do that for yourself in that moment? Because that's the only time you can control. You can't control the past and you can't control the future. You can't control what people will say. You can't control what people will do. You can't control what your body essentially is going to do. What you can control is how you respond in that moment. And it is, surrendering all of that stuff. Like, even if it's asking yourself, can I control this? Like, whatever's happening in that moment, can I control it? And if it's no, then how do you surrender it? How do you let that go? So that then you can have peace of mind, because otherwise, like, it will just keep coming back. And then you end up in panic.
Before we go, because I know I'm not sure, do you have to go now, or are you?
I've still got a little bit of time if we
Okay.
to cover.
So
Yeah.
if we just go, I don't know how long if we have it long enough, but I'll just say it anyway. So if we go to so after your loss and that sort of journey that you went through to where you are now, because I know you said like a lot of the changes that you went through happened between your loss and then your rainbow, and then obviously, after your rainbow you obviously had more changes, but I know that was your initial, beginning to where you are now and what you do to help women.
It was literally because the healing journey was nothing I'd kind of, like, I didn't anticipate, I didn't expect anything from myself. And I did know that I had to grieve. I did know that I had to give myself permission to feel the feelings, like, however they presented, which is what I did. I gave myself permission to feel whatever it was that I felt when I woke up that day. If it was that I was heavy and sad or numb, like, I just myself to be there. If it was that I was feeling lighter and okay and happy or whatever, I allowed myself to be there. I didn't make myself feel a particular way. And once I was able to start to work with my emotional health, my mental health obviously started to decline. Like, my husband had seen me in depression before, after my dad passed away. So he was starting to recognize, obviously, that I was sort of just swinging back that way. And so he was like a supporter on the sidelines, giving me inspiration and support. So I ended up just working a lot on my mental health at that point. I felt like my thoughts were so noisy, and I was like, I need to figure out how I can calm them down so that I can think straight, so that I can function as a human, because I was like so like consumed in my head that I couldn't think of anything else on the outside of me. So again, so this is where, like, I said I was really good at writing. Like, I just wrote. I was writing, I was journaling all of the time. I was just getting the thoughts out onto paper, because for me that was a way that I could give my thoughts permission to be seen, because I was like giving them a space to be seen. And once I started to calm, like, the sound in my head, I realized that my physical body was failing as well. I was very sick. I ended up, because I lost a lot of blood through the miscarriage, ended up anemic. And because I wasn't getting up and walking, because I was I just wanted to stay in bed for periods of time. I was just feeling really weak. Like I felt really weak in my body. I had given my emotions and my thoughts a lot of space in the first few weeks without really recognizing that my body, my physical body, needed support. But when I chose to do that with my physical body, I was in a really good headspace to receive the information that the doctors were telling me. So I found a new doctor after the miscarriage, and she was a holistic GP type thing. And she really just opened up my eyes to my physical body. Because I thought on paper, I was like, yeah, I'm great. I'm a good candidate to fall pregnant, to have kids. I don't smoke, I don't drink. I exercise. I was an elite athlete when I was younger. Like I'm sweet. But when my GP brought attention to the way that really my internal health was, I was like, oh, holy crap. Like, she goes, your body couldn't hold a pregnancy because it couldn't function for itself first. And she said to me, if I had gone to her before trying to conceive, she would have told me not to. She goes, your body needed a lot of help to get to the point where it would have been able to hold a pregnancy. So I did a lot of work with her at that point. She told me about the methylation system in the body and told me essentially our body knows how to heal itself when we can give it the right environment. So I spent a couple of months working with her around that to get my body to that point. And then obviously she kind of told me, she's like, now is a really good time if you wanted to try again. Like this is the time that you could do it. So mentally, emotionally, physically, I felt really strong. And I knew that I was in the place where if I was to go through this again, that I would be okay. Like it would be crap. But I was mentally and emotionally, physically stronger than what I was. So I could cope. And I had been to rock bottom. I knew what it was like there. So I knew I could get myself out. When I got to that point where my physical and emotional and mental health was all okay, that's when my sort of thought processes started to switch to like, okay, now what? I don't want to go back to a toxic work environment. I have this inner desire to do something more with what I've been through. What does that look like? How can I do that? So that's when I was actually pregnant then with my rainbow, and I enrolled in a life coaching program where I was like, at the end of this, I'm going to be specializing in pregnancy loss. So, and I thought at the end of it too, I was like, yeah, I can totally run a business with a newborn because she'll totally sleep like that. So that didn't work either.
Yeah. I remember the newborn bit, and I'm shocked every time. Shocked every time. I've had 3 kids, and I'm shocked every single time, and I'm freaking out about this one because I don't know. You know, again, if she's born, terrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, she you know, it's going to be interesting because, you know, she'll sleep for the first few days and then it will be, and anyone knows, God knows, but
Yeah.
I surely don't. So she'll either sleep through the night or she won't.
Mine didn't. I swear it was born with FOMO. I swear she was born with the fear of missing out. And there was just, I had 20-minute increments of where she would nap. So I was like, awesome. So, yeah, so I just tried to obviously bring everything from what I had gone through and essentially the transitions in my healing journey to a program that I could then guide and support other women through. And then, which is what I did. I managed to do that. And then I started helping women through that. I started helping lost mums navigate, life after loss, because they had tried so many different ways. They had tried therapy, they had tried all these different avenues, and it didn't work. So they're like, well, now what can we try? So then I sort of offered that I could support them, and they agreed to walk down that path with me, and they saw incredible transformations in their life. And then I had women reaching out to me wanting to know how they could do that then for someone else, like how they could do what I do. And I was, at the beginning, I was like, I don't know how that looks. I don't know how I'm just a life coach. Like, that was my mentality. I'm just a life coach. Like, I'm no one special. How can I teach you? And then it was probably about 6 months after that, I realized how I could do that, which is then where the pregnancy loss practitioner certification came in, because it kind of I packed so much value into a structure that I had essentially created for myself. And then I was like, well, this works. I know this works. So then I could teach it to someone else. And so it's what I do. I teach that same framework to other women that want to know how to do that for someone else, want to know how to hold support for them, want to know that they can actually listen to them and give them tools to support themselves. Because I feel like that was what was missing in my journey. I had someone to listen, which was the therapist, but I didn't know how to support myself. I'm like, I'd leave her sessions. I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I was going back like time and time again. I'm like, I don't want to keep going back to the therapist years on end. So I'm like, I need tools. So that's what I give them, is that space, safe space, and tools, because then you're teaching them and empowering them that they can do it for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's the worst part about counseling, because you can keep going and keep going and keep going and not see results in terms of like the tools and the how to do things. They just send you off with worksheet and you're like, thanks.
Yeah.
I mean, I got
do
to
I
talk
say
to
thanks?
you.
Like,
Yeah. Like, I think that, I love your approach, the mind, body, and soul, like the whole approach of just the whole of you, because it really doesn't work separately. And I find a psychologist really just covers the mind, and your doctor really just covers your body. But having all of it just come together and work on it as a holistic thing, I think is just it's you can't put a price on it. It's just so healing, and you can't get that healing any other way.
No. And that's like every conversation I've had with, my students and other professionals as well, is currently what's missing in the medical system and the therapy and counseling system is the body piece. Like, you're a whole human being. You cannot just separate your mind. You can't separate your body or your spirit. Like, it is all part and parcel. You are one whole being, and we need to work and process and show compassion to absolutely every single piece of that. And the only way to do that is to have that awareness. So, trauma is held on a body, in your body. It's held in your nervous system. And you can't just go to a psychologist and talk your way out of that. It has to be processed on a body level first before your body can feel safe to then go to your mind and release it. Like, it has to be like this. It's got to be a whole body process. And the medical system doesn't even acknowledge really that the pregnancy loss is trauma to your body. Like, it's just like, if you go to a doctor, they'll say, just try again in a month, or when you get your first cycle, try again.
Yeah. No, it's true.
And I'm like, and not even the doctors are saying, okay, this is trauma. Like, you actually have to spend time and heal your body.
Yeah.
And then a lot of trauma is held in our womb at that point. So then you've got to heal your womb space to be able to conceive again. And there's so many different elements that you are not going to get from a GP, and also you're not going to get from a therapist. Like, a therapist is not going to address your body. It's going to address your mind, give you ways to release things from your mind, but that's it. It's just, same with cognitive behavioral therapy. It's all in your mind. It's all going to release things from your mind. So I was like, you can't, and that's what I realized. Like, there's nothing that actually views a woman that has gone through pregnancy loss as a whole person. So that's why with the program, with the certification, it addresses you as a person. It addresses, and it's like a one-stop shop type thing. Like, you can get all of that healing and all of that recovery for your mind and your body and your soul, like, as we move through the program. It's designed in a specific way that allows natural progression for all of that, like natural progression for your emotions to be released from your body and for your thought processes to change. Because once your body feels safe, your mind will naturally feel safe to release, to change patterns. But when your body doesn't feel safe, you'll be exhausting all of your energy trying to shift a thought pattern that will never completely shift because your body still doesn't feel safe. So, like, it's a natural progression of healing and recovery when you address the woman as a whole and acknowledge that what she's gone through is trauma.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And that's why validation is so key. A lot of the time as well, a lot of women say, oh, the validation has just been so healing for me. And it often is that sort of validation because, yeah, it seems like in society and in the medical field, we just don't validate it. And I mean, it took showing my husband like other women like online who were talking about miscarriage, who were talking about pregnancy loss, for him to understand this is a whole thing. He was like, this is a whole thing? These women, like, I'm like, yeah, and she's like a year on. She's like 2 years ahead of me, or she's just gone through it. And he's just like, wow. And I'm like, that's what I've been trying to tell you. Like, I've been, I'm depressed for a reason. I'm not just like depressed, like, oh,
Yeah.
reason. And he was just like, wow, like this is a whole thing. Like, you don't just get over it. And I'm like, no, you don't.
No, and it's just, and that's the thing, like it's that societal like expectation that you get over it. It's like, no, we have to learn the tools to integrate it into our system because it's part of us and it can't be separate. But a lot of the time, because of the way society is, it makes us pull that piece out and keep it separate. But it's not. It's part of us and it always will be. And you cry. God, I don't even know how many years later, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 23, 6 years later, you end up crying and sobbing and processing still. Like, it's just that when you're given the right environment and when you're the right tools that you can do that for yourself, like, you're not hitting rock bottom and staying there each time it happens. Like, you can hit rock bottom and then you're like, okay, I can do this. I can get myself out. And you come out and you learn something new about yourself, and then you go to the top. Like, you come up here and you're like, oh yes, I'm amazing, I'm incredible, life is amazing. And then something happens and then you go back down, and then you're like, okay, and you allow yourself to stay there for however long you need and show yourself kindness and compassion there and cry or do whatever you feel like. Scream if you want to scream or punch something, preferably a pillow.
Yeah, not a person.
But not a person. Or a punching bag. But
yeah, punching bag, pillow, just not a wall.
Yeah.
Not hurt as well.
Yeah, not a wall either. Or a chair with something, like, you might hurt yourself. But
no objects.
You allow yourself. You do what your body needs you to do. and then you come back out, and then you can come back up here, and then life is life is okay again. And then the more time that progresses, the more time you spend up in where the life is okay. But it is all about processing and giving yourself the time to process those emotions, the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, whatever it is, and allow yourself to be in them, because when we ignore them, they stay in our system and they don't allow us to be up here and experience the fullest that your life can allow you to experience. They'll keep you down here, and you'll be just like in an okay place, but you'll still be in pain. But up here, like, that's the fullest expression of your life, where you can experience the pain, allow yourself to be there, experience the joy, allow yourself to be there in the beauty of your life, and know that it's integrated and that you're embodying all of those pieces of you. Like I feel like that's ideally where most people would want to live. I feel like that's where I want to live. I want to live where I can enjoy my days and not be afraid of what could happen, and not be afraid of being triggered, or not being afraid of, seeing people. I want to be living up here where I can be myself, my authentic self, and feel whatever I need to feel.
Yeah, and not have to fake it until you make it.
Yeah, not have to put on a mask. Like, it's too exhausting. It feels like society doesn't allow us to do that.
Yeah. On a final note, is there anything that you want to sort of say to any woman who's like going through this right now, who's watching and listening? Any advice or any sort of, I don't know, help?
Obviously, if you're going through the loss, or like you're trying to navigate the life now after the loss, the one thing would be or a couple of things, is to focus on what it is you need. What it is you need in that moment. Don't listen to anyone else. Don't listen to anyone saying that you should be at a certain point, or you should be feeling a certain way, or doing a certain thing, or showing up a certain way. Like, don't put that pressure on yourself. Do what it is that you need to do, and ask yourself like what it is that you need in that moment. And if it is that you want to crawl onto the couch and watch TV and eat ice cream, do that. If it's that you want to go out and go for a walk, go sit by the ocean, go get a coffee, do that. Whatever. Like, don't feel the pressure of other people. And actually, well, 3 things. You can say no. Like, even if they're offering to help, but you don't want them around the house because you want to crawl up on the couch and you don't want to see anyone, you don't want to talk to anyone, you can say no. You don't have to have them over just because they're helping. Just tell them how you're feeling, and that you will respond back to them at a later date, where you'll reach back out when you need the help, when you need the support, just so that they know that their support is, it's valid. Like, they want to come over and they want to help, and that you're acknowledging that, but it's just not the right time. So know that you can say no, because I know a lot of women have really struggled with setting that kind of boundary, where people are wanting to come and help and they feel obligated to say yes, but it's really then encroaching on their value and really what they're feeling at that time. And then the third thing is just feel what it is you need to feel, witness it, don't ignore it, because when we ignore our emotions, they don't go away. Ignoring them might be okay for a period of time. It might feel like it's the thing that you want to do because it's the most painful thing to feel. But what happens is, when we witness them, they will actually leave us quicker than if we avoid them. So just witness the emotions, sit in them, be numb, cry, do whatever it is that you need to do, but don't ignore them, don't suppress them, don't dismiss them, because they're coming to you to be released.
Yeah. Even if you're scared, you're not going to be able to stop crying. Give it a go. You will eventually stop crying. You'll run out of liquid.
Yeah. Your body will stop you from crying when it's ready. So it's not like you'll be crying forever. And that's the thing. I felt like I'd run out of tears that many times, but you stop.
Yeah.
And it's incredible, the release after that. Like, it's incredible how light you can feel when you witness your emotions.
Yeah. Thank you so much for speaking with me and sharing everything. And I'm sure so many women will be interested in your practice and your things that you're facilitating, like the courses. So I will link you down the bottom. So if anyone wants to have a look into that, and yeah, it sounds so amazing. Like, every time I've heard you talk about it, every time I've looked at it, it sounds so good. And the thing is, like, this is counseling for me. Like, I've literally just spent all this time speaking to so many women. It's like therapy. But yeah, there's something to be said. It's a different kind of therapy when you actually go for the whole body approach, and you're actually going through something that's already been tried and tested and already been done. And thank you so much for providing women with that service and with that course, because yeah, we do need it. We need these things. We need this event. We need more courses and more people like yourself who are there and are ready to listen.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. There needs to be more women, and that's what I'm trying to create.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Please note that all speakers, including experts and professionals, express information, views, and opinions that should not be used to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any medical conditions. If you have a medical issue, please consult a qualified professional. Speakers voice their own views, opinions, and conclusions, and they may not reflect the views, opinions, and conclusions of other speakers. Ella Rose, The Joy of Sunflowers, and its sponsors may not endorse all or any of the views, opinions, or conclusions expressed.
And I